When this boy meets world.
Here at Bro Meets World, we're synonymous with two things: reviewing a television show from 30 years ago and Hyundai.
What up, bros?
What up, bros?
And welcome to Bro Meets World.
When it's Bro Meets World.
What was that echo? Just like off into the distance going
It's
off?
reverb.
We are coming to you from the future. You guys, this is our season 4 recap, our season 4 report card. For those of you who don't know, our season 4 file got lost in the time. We did many changes. We have changed locations, changed jobs, changed a lot of things. And in doing so, every now and then an episode gets lost. So we are re-recording this, but don't worry because we're not going to go too far. This is still our reactions to season 4, and we will not talk about any of the things that we have learned since the time that we originally recorded this episode, but we may refer to a little show called Pod Meets World every now and then because, I mean, there's just no getting past the fact that we now have been on the show a few times, and so our insights are going to be a wee bit diff.
Yeah. So we originally were supposed to release, and we probably did record this episode in fall of 2020. We're coming at you, spring, early summer 2024.
Don't say that because it makes it seem so much longer than it needs to.
Wish we could say things in the future have improved drastically. Cannot do that. But what I can say is that we have now made it to where we are giving you our thoughts on season 4 after the cast has released all of their thoughts on season 4. So we have all new insights to take into consideration this time.
Absolutely. And we are really excited that we get to share this episode with you and get to go back in time a little bit and revisit season 4. Because if you're doing the rewatch podcast, that's what you just did. So, yeah.
How do you want to start this, Ceej? Season 4 report card.
Season 4, it's fun to be in season 4. It's really fun to look at it and look back at everything, just so everyone knows. I'm not just pulling from my memory. I actually went back and I looked at all of our episodes and I listened to everything. And
oh my god, pause. Just have to say this. I'm so sick of season 4 now. I've been watching season 4. I've been listening to our episodes of season 4. I've been hearing the Pod Meets World's episode of season 4. I'm season 4 out my damn ears at this point. It's a great season, but it's a lot.
The rewatch became the rewatch. So it's a little inception over here, but we want to give you guys this episode because you guys have been asking us for it, and we thought that we would release it around the same time that season 4 ended with Pod Meets World. So let's just talk about what you thought about season 4 in totality. What do you think about it? Again, only going up to what we've seen so far.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to give a sincere, genuine response of hey, I'm coming straight off the heels of watching 1, 2, 3, and 4, and all I have is the knowledge of seasons 1 through 3 to compare it to. I'll try my best.
Yeah.
But it's really hard not to take into consideration the fact that we're on season 7 in real time. And so we've seen a lot of shit episodes. So I actually am looking back at season 4 with probably far more favorable eyes than I did even at the time. I think that some of the episodes, I hear us being a little bit more critical, but overall, I'm compared to the shit we've just been watching, season 4 is a goldmine across the board.
It is a gold mine, but also I will say I stand by almost everything that I said about this season. And that being said, I love this season. I think this season's great. I think this season's iconic. I think we get so many really good episodes that we are going to dive into when we do our accolades. But in general, the idea that this episode and the writing team brings so many really intense, critical, and thought-provoking storylines means that they're up for conversation. There are lots of things that we said that I stand by in terms of security guy really does kind of take the position of a white man's lens compared to what that journey would be for a person of color. We do not treat women well I mean, we're going to talk about Lonnie and like all this other stuff. And that is a pattern that just was not good. Yes, we had so many iconic moments during this season, but that doesn't mean that this season is above critique. And that's where I stand.
What I will say, and this is something that Pod Meets World has discussed a little bit, was just that it's clear that the world is expanded in season
Yeah.
4. Like, we're getting new sets almost every other episode. Like, all these new characters are kind of being interjected into it. And it just feels like a bigger show. It feels like we've strayed a long way from just like the family sitcom in the Matthews home. Now we're like in wrestling rinks, and we're at like cafeteria lunchrooms and funerals, and we're at grocery stores and the trailer park, and we're just all over the place visually, which I think kind of helps season 4 feel more distinguish itself from the previous seasons, but also like it involves new parts of the world, I guess. Like, we're exposing Cory to new parts of the world a lot in season 4.
Yeah, we said that the world gets bigger.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's like totally true is the world in Boy Meets World gets bigger. And now that we know this, it's like all of that made a difference, and you can really see. And now that we have like some understanding about not just the behind the scenes, but kind of the arc of the characters overall, I will say that this season is like it's in the tops.
It feels like this is the season that they figured it out. It feels like, I think I mentioned this to you before. Maybe it was on our Pod Meets World Reacts or whatever, but it feels like Boy Meets World had like a recipe that had been passed down for years and years that wasn't written down. And so, like, you have this cookie recipe and it says, all right, put in a smidge of sugar and this much of salt. Like, it's not specific. So it always comes out differently. Season 4 is like, this is the best recipe of all the ingredients. I feel like Shawn is showing me dramatic stuff. He's showing me humor. Cory is like the perfect version of Cory, where he's not too much of an asshole, but he's not like so arrogant that he thinks the world should revolve around him. Eric, I think, has a beautiful arc in season 4, going from like, where do I even fit into, oh no, I'm absolutely going to college. Like, I just think this is the best of the best. And like, yeah, there's probably things I'm missing with Amy and Alan that probably were better in previous seasons. I really feel like Jonathan Turner was done so dirty. But other than that, like, I think this is the best there is.
This is the best. This may be the best that the show gets as a season long. But I will say that the show still has a lot of tricks up its sleeves in terms of stories that it wants to tell.
Sure,
and I think that's
definitely.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just start with what we usually do with our superlatives. We're going to start with our honor roll. These are the episodes that were, as we just said, the best of the best. I will give our best episode, I will give the audience best episode, and we'll kind of go into some of our favorites. Okay, so are you looking at the notes right now? No, don't, because I want to surprise you. Okay, what do you think is the best episode this season in terms of our ratings?
Again, we did this some time ago, and it's going to be hard for me to calculate it. I would think that we would say probably Hair Today is up there.
It is up there.
Or Long Walk to Pittsburgh. Those are the two I'm guessing.
Oh, so interesting. Well, our top rated episode of this season was B&B's B&B.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And that what's funny is I think that is not only my favorite episode of the season. I feel like it does such a good job in terms of balancing story, in terms of giving us the Cory and Shawn hijinks, but also the Eric and Feeney bonding episode that our storylines that we get. But it also is just like a memorable episode. Whereas with you, your highest rating, and I'm just talking about you, your highest rating is A Long Walk to Pittsburgh. And I think that that's why it would make sense that you think that, because I gave A Long Walk to Pittsburgh part 1 and 2. I kind of brought it down a little bit. I still think those are like B episodes to me, but you were like 100, don't touch. I know what I'm talking about. So yeah.
And you know what? I'll stand by that because of this. Even years later, I can say that, yeah, there's some other episodes that really stand out to me. I love the B&Bs. I love Hair Today. I actually really love the security guy episode. Like there's a ton of episodes that I really liked. Even Chick Like Me, I think is probably better than I had originally thought it was. But the thing about Long Walk to Pittsburgh Part 2 is that even if you listen to Pod Meets World reaction, this is like the shift. This is like
Yeah.
before this episode and after this episode defines the show in such a way that you could never take out Long Walk to Pittsburgh and the rest of the show still work or make sense. Like it
I give you that.
redefines Cory and Topanga's relationship. It redefines the intentions of the show to be about more of a rom-com than just a com, and like switch from family com to rom-com and teenage like soap drama. Like there's so much that shifts with this episode that it may be the most important episode of the series.
But
I would
see,
go as far as
we've had this conversation before, and I will always stand by it. Just because it's one of the most important episodes or one of the most defining episodes does not make it the best episode. And that's just going to be my argument.
That's fair. And that's fair. But to me, like when people are like, give me your top 5 rappers, it's like, well, we can't just talk about lyrics. We got to talk about cultural impact. And so with this, I'm like, I can't think of an episode that has a bigger cultural impact. So for that reason, to me, it's A1. But I know I hear your complaints. I've heard the cast complaints. They're all valid. I still love the episode.
And to use your argument, which by the way, I agree with you. I'm just saying sometimes you get a cultural impact and you're like, but was that a good impact?
Sure.
What exactly did you influence?
Yeah, and that's fair.
Not saying any names. Okay. That being said, what is your favorite character this season?
My favorite character, honestly, it's such a tough race between like, I'm gonna say my favorite character is Shawn.
Ooh, okay. Tell me why.
I'm gonna say my favorite character is Shawn because I love how the front half of the season kind of focuses on his family dynamic. I love seeing Chet. I love seeing the class struggles explored with Shawn and his family. I also just think that Shawn does a great job of showing him as in his comedic performances. I think he's great. I think Ryder does great. I also love his dramatic performances in this season, even though Ryder doesn't always quite agree with that. And I just think he just is consistently the best character in terms of depth, in terms of being three-dimensional. Like I just think he gives the most out of every character. But it's a tough call.
Yeah, no, it is a tough call, and I agree with you a lot of what you said. I do think that something we've talked about before, and something that we'll talk about again, is the idea of Boy Meets World kind of rotates who the boy is.
Yeah,
and I think we've talked about it. I believe it's this season, but definitely there is or maybe it was season 3. There was a time where the opening intro was just Ryder, Will, and Ben.
Yeah.
And I kind of think of that just because it becomes their story collectively and we rotate who this is about, which brings me to my favorite character, who is actually Eric. I think Eric this season gets some of the best work that Eric will ever get. I think that we get to see him be both smart and dumb and horny and motivated and have problems with his parents, but also be a really good big brother. I think we use Eric the perfect amount in this season, and I think that this season is Eric's season.
I really struggled between Shawn and Eric, and I kind of saved Eric for my most improved character for all the things that you've said. Because if we think about Eric in season 1, 2, and even 3, we just don't get the depth that we see with Eric this season. Like you said, this is Eric's season. From the first episode to the last episode, it tells a complete arc that's all about Eric and this character who we've witnessed change. We've witnessed go from the guy who was just like chasing girls or whatever to having to think a little bit more deeper about like, well, who do I want to date and who do I want to be? And yeah, I can go out on a date with this girl, or she may have a kid. Maybe that's a lifestyle I can go down, but is that really what's right for me? Maybe Feeney, I should work with this guy more, and maybe I do need to be challenged more. Like he's doing things that previous seasons the Eric that used to hang out with Jason just would not do or consider doing. So I completely agree. Season 4 is the season.
Okay, my most improved character, actually going to be a little bit of a surprise. I'm going to list Cory as my most improved character.
Honestly, that's a great choice.
This is Cory being used in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And I think it does have something to do with the fact that we are able to balance Cory with the other leads. Cory is not always the center of the story. He does not always take center stage. He is allowed to be a good best friend. He is allowed to be a complicated partner. He is allowed to be a brother in a way that he hasn't been and he won't be in a lot of other episodes. So I just think that this is the best of Cory we're going to get. And I honestly, I
think a big part of that has to do with the fact that there's so many episodes I can think of where Cory's just kind of like the background dude.
Yeah, like I said.
Where Eric is the lead and Cory's in the background studying for SATs, or he's getting his tonsils taken out. Like he is the B story, and he's able to just provide humor because he doesn't have to carry the story on his back in a way that he will most likely have to do for the remainder of the series in a large part. And I just think that when I think of Cory in season 4, I think I've mentioned this before. To me, he reminds me so much of Hey Arnold. That character who's like my main trait is that I want to help the people in my life. I see that Shawn's mom is across the street. I'm going to walk the highway and I'm going to talk to her, not because I'm getting anything out of this, just because I want to help my friends and the people they care about be better, which again is not a character trait with Cory going forward. And so it's highly missed, and I think you're right. I think this is the best version of Cory.
Absolutely. God. I think that I agree with everything that you said. I also feel like Ben is just having fun this season.
Sure.
And I'm not going to say that he doesn't have fun in later seasons, because there's so many episodes in later seasons where I feel like they're having too much fun, or like it's maybe too much fun. The direction was, let's just let him have fun. But I do feel like Ben is being able to kind of stretch his acting skills a lot this season.
Sure.
And that's what I'm really happy about. And I'm really excited that these episodes exist, because it allows us to be endeared to Cory. So later on, when he's not that person, we remember who he was.
And I will also say this, that it feels like the show itself is like kind of its best version. And when I think about how future seasons, I won't name any specific ones, can get very dark because there's a lot of dramatic episodes all together, or it feels like there's just a lot of silliness thrown around. This season feels pretty well balanced in terms of like, hey, we're going to have a serious episode, then we're going to have a funny episode, then we'll have one that's kind of middle of the road, and then we'll get back into a serious episode, or maybe one character is going through something serious, but the other characters are going through something fun. And it feels like, for the most part, and there are exceptions from episode to episode, but for the most part, the balance between drama and comedy is the best mix in the season.
I don't think I mentioned it in the last one, but one of my top episodes this season is Learn to Fly. And I was like, I stand by that. It balances Eric and Cory's storyline so well. It has them actually learn kind of like similar lessons, but through each other. And I feel like this season is really good and it's really fun and I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, and I'll also say that even as I just kind of scroll through and look at the episode titles, I'm like, oh, I would rewatch any of these episodes
Yeah,
at any time.
I think
Any
that
of these
these
episodes.
are the episodes that people are constantly thinking of when they think of Boy Meets World. Yeah.
What I will say, because you said, hey, nothing's above critique. I do feel like probably the biggest critique I have with season 4 is that it feels like it shifts focus midway through. And
Yes.
it feels like the top half of the season is all about kind of like building out Shawn's family and even like the
Yep.
Matthews a little bit more. We get like the I ain't gonna spray lettuce no more episode and like them buying the wilderness store. Like all of that stuff kind of is a major focus up until I'll say like Turkey Day, the Thanksgiving episode is probably the last we really dive into the parents. And then from that point on, it just feels like a lot of kid-based focused conflict, and not that that's bad. It just feels like midway through the series they were like, we're not a family show anymore, we're like a teen show, and so that's
Yeah,
pretty evident.
I agree with you because it's funny if I look at the episodes, if you just look at them literally in a row, the first half is kind of like we get a little bit of establishing Topanga and Hair Today, Goon Tomorrow, but then after that we get a little bit of Shawn's storyline and Shawn's family. Then we move over towards the middle of the season and we're talking about Cory, and then the later half of the season we're talking about Eric.
Yeah.
So that's just like how most of these storylines go. And again, they hit a little bit of everything, but you're right, because they are hitting a little bit of everything, it kind of shifts. And I wonder, we've talked about this in our last episode. And by that I mean like the last episode of season 4, where it's like if we rearrange some of these episodes, I wonder if it would flow better. Because we talked about the fact that if you move cult fiction to a finale, it makes more sense because it's kind of like a cliffhanger and we don't
Sure.
really know what's going on. But the tone, we go from this silly, wacky quiz show to security guy to learning to fly, and then we end on like the gut punch that is cult fiction. I think that makes more sense than quiz show, kind of kooky, security guy, kind of lessony, cult fiction, super dark, learning how to fly, everything's a happy ending.
It's funny is that the back half, I think you could change around some of the episodes. I don't know that it would really make a massive difference for me, but you know what I think wouldn't work? Taking any of those episodes, regardless of like the finality of storylines, and mixing it in with the Fishing for Verna. Like Fishing for Verna and Hair Today, Goon Tomorrow almost seem like from a different season in terms of how much has happened and the storylines that are being discussed towards the end. It just feels like almost like season 3-ish more than it does season 4. And so that's what I mean. There's some kind of division happening here where there's like a 4.1 and a 4.2 that I could almost see.
I completely agree with you. And it would be interesting to, at some point in time, take all of the episodes and put them in like the order that they feel they should go to. Like these
Ooh.
storyline, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
we talk about it very often whenever we're doing season recaps, where we're like, this kind of feels like an episode from the previous season, or this
Yep.
episode feels like it would be better in the following season. I feel like we could like shuffle the deck a little bit. And that'd be fun. Okay. Anything else you want to say in terms of honor rolls?
Do you have a favorite quote that comes to mind? A favorite Feeny
Favorite.
lesson?
My favorite quote actually comes from B&B's B&B, which is Feeny being like, hey, you're maybe I'm still young. Like when Feeny is like, hey, he's talking to the newlywed couple who we all expected to be like this young couple, but it turned out to be a really older couple. And Feeny had just left the Boston, being in Boston, and
Yeah.
his on again, off again lover that we don't really know that much about. I like that lesson of Finney being like, hey, it's never too late. And that kind of goes throughout with the fact that Eric, eventually goes to school. Topanga and Cory make it work, even though her parents moved. I kind of feel like that's kind of like a thesis of the episode, is that it's never too late until it's too late.
It's a great one. It's a great one. I have a lot of quotes and a lot of Feeny lessons to come to mind. I really kind of like, I don't know if you remember this, and You Can't Go Home Again It's the pilot. It's the one where they stop at the small town that
Yeah.
has like a yogurt
Yeah.
thing, or was it yogurt or sprinkles or pie or soup? I forget what they're famous for.
Yeah.
Um,
There was a giant yogurt cup, and then
yes.
the soup isn't bad, but the pie is why you stay.
There's a scene where Alan sits down with Eric at the end where he's like, one day you'll realize that all you've done is settle and you'll not be happy with yourself, or something like that. That I was just like, wow, that's a great quote. And there's a moment later on where, Alan, who's been having this identity crisis of, am I grocer? Am I grocer? You know, Cory says at the end, like, how do you know for sure? And then Eric says, because he's dad. And then Alan kind of smiles, realizing that, like, yeah, he says, that's mostly what I am. That's to say, like, I'm not just a grocer, I'm a father. Like, there was moments sprinkled, like those, what I like to call it the Michael Jacob moments, sprinkled throughout, probably more perfectly this season than any other one. I could think of like a whole other, like a dozen of these moments throughout the series, where this season specifically, where they say something where I'm just like, wow, that really turned the whole episode around for me. Like, for example, in Uncle Daddy, where at the end Eric says, I'm gonna go study for my SATs now. Like, you know what it means to him, because he's been like fighting, what school is and his place in school, and does he even want to go to college? And so for him to have that moment where he says, like, yeah, this is what I want, it just kind of is like a perfect cap to the episode. And I feel like there's a dozens of those throughout each episode. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out.
While you say that, you just made me realize that in the shuffling of the deck, Uncle Daddy ends with him saying, I'm going to go study for my SATs. And then 2 episodes later, we get Security Guy, where they're trying to force him to take his SATs, and he's like, nah, I don't know if I want to. So this is what I'm talking about. It's just like, it's a little all over the place in terms of consistency, and I feel like if
that.
you
Yeah.
move them around, they make a little bit more sense. But that's just a little small critique. That said, I also want to, now that we know a little bit better, give credit to not just Michael Jacobs, which we call the Michael Jacobs moment, but we now know that there are people like Jeff Sherman. There's
Sure.
people like Jeff Manel. There are people like Jeff McCracken, apparently all the Jeffs, but
Yeah.
also Mark Blattman and the other writers, and Gary Miller, who all were able to write these very special moments and understand, as you were saying earlier, in terms of like a recipe being passed down generation to generation. This kind of feels like everyone understood you need this particular ingredient in order to make it good.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about the band. Let's talk about the tension. I will say that the fans' least favorite episode this season has been Fishing for Verna, which you got to point it out. It's kind of out of nowhere, even though I think Cory does a great job. I think the actress who played Verna is great. I love the like little peek behind the curtain of the hunters and all of these was Verna right? Was Verna wrong? Oh my God, we have to bring this up when we talk to them. But that said, our least liked episode in terms of grading would be Singled Out, and I will stand on that ground today.
Yeah, and here's the thing, is that season 4 doesn't have a lot of duds. So
It doesn't.
even though I would watch Fishing for Verna or Singled Out over some season 6 or 7 episodes, I will say that, like, I remember getting to the end of Singled Out being like, this episode didn't do anything. No one learned anything. Like, no one's better off because of any of the events that have taken place for this episode. Like, it was really random. And as for the Fishing for Verna, I think part of the reason why this episode falls a little flat in retrospect is that it was building up a storyline that didn't go anywhere. We've spent so much time, flushing out who Verna is, only for her to disappear at Thanksgiving and will literally never come back ever again. So,
Yeah.
like, why are we spending time on this character? I feel like the 16 candles and 400-pound men, like, the Cory helping Frankie almost seems like it's more deserving because we actually know this character and have known this character for years, versus Verna, who we were all supposed to care about, and then they didn't do anything with it.
Something that we said previously, and it brings into the next episode that's kind of like one of our lower ones, is it would have made more sense for Verna to be the one who was in the hospital at the end of Cult Fiction, because then that makes her storyline and her arc and why are they gone again? What broke up Shawn's family again? Like all of that would have been better served as plot, considering that we got to know Verna this season and we kind of already had let Turner go. So the fact that we end Turner's story being done dirty after months and this entire season of kind of being pushed to the back, that kind of makes me upset. And I will say that when I look at Cult Fiction, it is one of my least favorite episodes because it's just all over the place. It doesn't really make sense. And I feel like you could have had Turner be the one who kind of gets aggressive or is like all up in the cult leader's face. And then you could have had Verna be the one who's actually injured, not necessarily dead, but injured in the hospital. And that explains Shawn's predicament and where he is and the idea of turning to God. Because again, the turning to God when it was Turner didn't quite make sense. But turning to God when it's your mom, I could see a little bit more. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, Cult Fiction is a ridiculous episode.
It
It's
is.
ridiculous. It's over the top. I think people think fondly of it because it's a memorable episode, but there's nothing in the episode that really holds up, I think, especially compared to some of the other episodes, which I think are just way more meaningful. I almost feel like you could have thrown this episode in at like the beginning of the season, like right after Shawn moves in with his parents. And so like we've already been introduced to his family life, and then we let go of Turner maybe earlier on. I don't know, like that could have easily maybe like I feel like you could have swapped Dangerous Secret in this episode and they both would have served the same purpose, but it would have at least ended Turner's storyline in a place where we as an audience remember him and his relationship with Shawn. Whereas coming at the end of season 4, where we haven't seen Turner since he took the Christmas picture on
Yeah,
the Matthews couch on Easy Street. Like he hasn't been doing shit, so it
you're
doesn't
right.
really mean anything when Turner dies at the end. And I know he doesn't die, but in my head canon, he's dead.
Well, like to your point, and it's so funny. Talk about rearranging. Put Cult Fiction as is right after Easy Street.
Mm.
That makes more sense. Remember how, or right before Easy Street. Well, right before Easy Street wouldn't make sense because Turner's in the photo. But the idea of we're all together at Christmas, we already had this kind of speaking to God, do the right thing moment. So if you put Turner being injured right after that, A, that explains where Turner is for the rest of the season. And B, that also kind of puts in the stakes of Shawn's story and narrative kind of being lumped together, if that makes
If
any sense.
if we switch it with Dangerous Secret, both are very special episodes.
Yeah.
Um, it would have taken the Turner death would be taking place almost right after Janitor Dad. So we know that we've already set up Shawn's home, and now he doesn't have a reason for Turner in his life anyway.
Correct.
And then the B storyline of Dangerous Secret, which is Cory trying to like help Topanga, I think would
Yeah.
make way more sense post Long Waltz to Pittsburgh, where Topanga's like, I want to do everything you do with the person with Cory. And then for that to happen and for her to be like, I want to take things slow right before learning to fly, like to me, that makes more sense because now he's off at college with this girl who wants to bang, and he's like, well, my girlfriend doesn't want to bang me. So like it all would have just made more sense, I think, to do that
Agreed. I
swap.
completely agree. And understand that, especially now that we know a little bit more, I understand that a lot of it had to do with casting and scripts and what was going on behind the scenes. I'm not saying that they didn't have their reasons for doing what they did. I'm just saying narratively, it probably would have made a little bit more sense. And if you could shuffle the deck, I think some of these episodes that are poor kind of are poor, not only because they don't make sense within themselves, but they don't make sense within the season. That said, you were right. I had to struggle to find episodes that we just didn't like this season. A lot of the episodes, even the ones that we don't like, aren't the worst episodes. We do so well in terms of our grading, and especially right out of the gate, it was like banger after banger after
Yeah.
banger. So yeah, I don't know. I just think that's really good.
Here's a
Okay.
question for you before we kind of move on from like good, bad, or whatever. Do you have an episode that you just looking back on, you just think is fun? Like it's not great, it's not terrible, but it's an episode that you're like, wow, I would rewatch that. Like that's a good time.
Ooh, see. Yeah, you messed it up when you said I would rewatch that because I feel like to me, Quiz Show is an episode where
That's
it's like
the one I
let's just
thought of right away too.
yeah. The Quiz Show to me is just fun nonsense. It's
Yeah.
silly. There's not much that we need to get. It's sitcom. It's surreal in a
Mhm.
lot of ways. So to me, that's what Quiz Show is. But you were like that you would rewatch again, and I'm like, I don't know. But I do find it fun and just stupid.
I
Yeah,
think
that's how I feel
Quiz
about it.
Show and Shallow Boy would be ones that I would just put on just because they seem fun.
I don't need Shallow Boy. I didn't like it then, and I here's the thing, I just didn't like the episode as much. But that's me.
Oh.
Okay. Let's move on to graduation, our little graduation ceremony. What
Ooh.
do you feel about the fact that, well, as you said, we lose Turner and we lose Lonnie? What do you
You know what? And it's not he's not on here as part of our graduating ceremony because of one more appearance later in season 5, but I think Frankie deserves to be on this list. And
ah
I mean, yes, he makes a cameo appearance in the graduation episode, but other than that, like this character who Cory literally was risking his relationship with Topanga for in the 16 Candles episode is vanished after that. So like after Thanksgiving. So I just yeah, he comes back, but he really is departing.
Well, it's so funny that you say that because we talked about graduation ceremony. I don't know what we call this. Dropouts. Like there are so many characters that we are introduced that are vital to the story that we never see again. I'm
Yeah.
talking about Hector, Frankie's little brother. I'm
Yeah.
talking I'm talking about Topanga's aunt, who
Never
was
comes
like
back.
such an important part to their story. She is Deus Ex Machina in terms of saving their relationship. And she is referred to in Learn to Fly, but she is not ever seen again.
No. And honestly, Verna is graduating.
Berna,
Never
drop
seen
out.
again.
Like again, it's crazy because we took time, we developed all these characters. We get who I'm gonna call not Tommy.
Not Tommy, yes.
That storyline, we spent a lot of time.
Ryan's his name.
Yeah, Ryan. We get a lot of these characters.
Who was the
was
original Lonnie? Ezekiel? The guy who worked at the store who was like, "Oh, I gotta go back to the country, but I got a niece that can take this job."
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like these like don't get me wrong, every now and then you get characters that are just there for the sake of an episode and they
Mhm.
are supposed to do a plot. And like that's how I felt is um his character was, which it was only there to get us to Lonnie. But
And
there
Lonnie took the cast photo at the end of the Christmas episode, making you think she was going to be involved. That's the last we see of Lonnie.
that's what I'm saying. The difference between that character and someone like Lonnie and someone like Verna and
Yeah.
someone like Aunt Prudence, who I know again just making a one-time episode appearance, but these are individuals that you have introduced to the story saying this person is important.
Yeah.
This person has impact into our storylines, and then they just disappear.
Yeah. It's a sad day. It's a sad day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you to the graduating class of season 4. We've appreciated all that you do. I think honestly, I think Turner's probably the hardest to lose, but because he was so underutilized this season, I'm gonna say Frankie's probably the one I'm gonna miss.
Oh, okay. You know what? I'll allow that. I'll allow that. Something I didn't really get to because this is his last appearance, but this would be the end of our turned on by Turner moment. And we
Oh,
shift because next season we get a new character and it becomes turned on by someone else. So this is the last that we get of Turned On by Turner.
wow. Do you feel like Matthew Lawrence was brought on specifically to like fill a hunk, like sized hole?
I don't like knowing what we know about like the casting and everything. I don't think it was. I think that They just needed a new character,
Hmm.
and probably someone who was a little bit more heartthrobby. But I don't know if that was like the only reason. But who knows? Like we definitely were pimping these child actors out.
100%. Hey, here's a little
Oh,
season 4
go
quiz
ahead.
question for you. Guess this, because Wikipedia has the viewership of each episode. Do you know what episode of season 4 was the most viewed in terms of its original air date?
I would assume Long Walk to Pittsburgh Part 2.
Long Walk to Pittsburgh Part 2 is not the correct answer.
Oh, well then what is it?
The most viewed episode with 16.3 million viewers, which, by the way, a hell of a
Yeah.
viewership. Like
Yeah,
nowadays, that's impossible to get. Like I'm sure they
exactly.
weren't even top tier at the time, but 16 million people watching your show is unheard of. Shallow Boy,
Are
actually.
you serious? We
Shallow
did it with
Boy.
Shallow Boy? I
It
can't believe that. I mean, I can because all of you have terrible taste, but
Shallow Boy, and then right behind that with 16 million viewers was Dangerous Secret. So I don't know if they promoted those episodes well, if there was just a good TGIF run that night, but yeah.
absolutely. Okay. I would say, what storyline do you think should be removed from this season?
Ooh, what storyline? I'm gonna say Lonnie.
Lonnie.
I
Okay.
just think Lonnie you could take her out. I don't think it would make that much of a difference. I think that she's mainly used in the way that like they write women characters that they don't really know what to do with. You know, if they wanted to actually have her and Eric be legitimate boyfriend girlfriends or have like a legitimate like emotional bond with each other, that would be great and I would feel differently. But I don't feel like she ever does that. I think she just is supposed to be, you know, when she was introduced, she gave me like Pam Anderson on Home Improvement vibes, like that, just like I'm just here for eye candy, and I think we could do without it. So I would say that one.
So it's so funny. My answer is going to be Frankie's little brother Hector. I feel like that, like, why? Like, I feel like we never needed it. There was at no point in time we needed it. But I also would say that you just made me realize while thinking about Eric and what we do to Eric, what we do to Eric's character moving forward. Again, this is just like something that we know. We know Eric becomes like this silly kind of creature. Um, I thought of Haley Dunphy from Modern Family and what they do
Hmm.
to her story. And it's kind of
Sure.
similar, where it's like at first she's just written off because she's pretty and she's dumb. But it turns out she's actually not as dumb as everyone thinks she is. She just has a different form of intelligence, and her form of intelligence isn't necessarily honored. And then she goes to college when no one thought she would be able to.
Sure.
And like all of those things. And then what do? The show needs her to stick around. So they then take all of that character development away and they just kind of make her the punchline of the joke in a lot of ways. And that's what I think this season does to Eric. I feel like this season is great at building him up, and then we will soon take all of that growth away.
Well, again, not looking forward and just
Yeah.
looking at the Eric that we got in season 4.
Yeah.
Great story for Eric.
Yeah,
I
I
love
completely
this
agree.
for him. Even though you and I, and even what was refreshing was hearing that the cast felt similarly, that this push for like college is it or you're just a townie forever.
Yeah.
Like I feel that so strongly, and I do think that there's other avenues that Eric could have done are gone down to find his path in life. But in terms of how it's written, it's a great story arc for him.
A little real life kind of mirroring. I also think that it's interesting that we have a cult fiction episode this season, and then on Time Meets World season, they have Andrew Keegan, who I will say has rumors of a cult and all this other stuff. And by the way, all the things that they say in the cult fiction episode are mirrored in what they're saying about the Andrew Keegan of it all. So I just find that hilarious that, a lot of people are like, he's so charming and he's just like really good. And it hugs. It's all about hugs, people. And so again, I am not saying anything other than it is such an interesting parallel to have on the very same season as cult fiction someone who has allegations of being in a cult. So
Wow. Wowzer.
Okay. All that being said, we want to thank everyone who joined us this season. This season, we had so many other Boy Meets World podcasts that joined us, and it was really a pleasure. And this is before the Pod Meets World of it all. These were our OGs. These were our peers in podcasting, specifically with Boy Meets World. So just wanted to make sure that we gave them a little shout out and thank them for coming on our show and making it as good as it could be.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else you want to say for this season?
I love season 4. There's been a lot of debate amongst like which is the best season. I think that grade-wise, I think we were kinder to season 3 than we were to season 4. I think that we probably
I didn't give you the final grade. I didn't give you the final grade.
Okay, all right. I think we remember in terms of culturally, like separate from our podcast, season 5 being really important, and season 5 is great. But I don't know. I'll take season 4 episode, like any season 4 episode, any day of the week. And also, season 4 would be the best episode to pull from, I think, if I wanted to just introduce someone to the idea of Boy Meets World. Like, you want to know what Boy Meets World is? Watch B&B's B&B. This is a great introduction to the show and these characters.
Yeah, I completely agree. I agree with that. I do think that it is some of the best of the I think it's some of the best that you're going to get in general when it comes to Boy Meets World, and I feel like it's a great opener if that's what you're trying to get people to be interested in.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yep. So that being said, I have not given you the grade yet. And when all is said and done, with the grades being in, season 4 is our highest rated.
Is it? Okay. All right.
It is. We gave season 4 overall an average of 85. And for those of you who are keeping track, season 4, 85, season 3, 83, and season 5, 81. So yeah.
Wow.
This was the season. This was the season to beat. And so, yeah, I'm really, really, really happy with this season. I think that we've done a great job. And yeah.
Wow. So we've rated season 3 higher than season 5. Interesting.
Yeah, we did. Again, season 3 had 83 and season 5 had an 81.
You know what? If I had to give you an explanation for that, I think that Cory is a better character in season 3 and 4. I think, again, I know in this timeline we haven't gotten to season 5 yet, but from what I remember, he's just way more arrogant and like unlikable from this point on. So
we get arrogant Cory moving forward. So if you didn't know, now you know, as they say.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this season's report card. We look forward to speaking with you more about season 4 when we talk with Pod Meets World. So if you haven't yet checked out that episode, please look forward to that and go check it out once it's released. And then you can join us for season 5. We already have it recorded, so you gotta wait that long. Again, this is us from the future telling you, it's not better. it's not better.
But it ain't bad.
I'm still here.
We're still here.
We're still here. So, all right. You guys remember to dream,
to try,
and to do good.
Later, bros.
Later, bros.
Boy Meets World was edited by Tony Curtis and produced by Ceej. Boy Meets World is a 2 Free Tokens media production.
Bye.
Bye.
When this boy meets world.
Join Jackie and Danielle, 2 best friends and ex-Blockbuster employees who are rewatching some of their favorite movies from the late 90s and early 2000s on the No More Late Fees podcast. And remember, be kind and rewind.